6. The cut scores may adjust, so that may end up becoming a level 7 or a level 5, just depending on what those scores look like from work keys or from ACT. But I think it's important to mention that through technical honors, the students have completed four years of mathematics, Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2, and then a 4th year of whatever it is that they've chosen to take for that. And then in addition to that, they are passing the work keys applied mathematics assessment. So what that applied mathematics assessment aligns to is really standards, has some Algebra 1, it's heavy on 8th grade math, it has a very little geometry, no Algebra 2, some statistics, a little bit of probability in there as well, and a little bit of business math. So the question then as it relates to further conversations with the graduation pathways panel would be, if we have a place for students that are not necessarily going college bound, that are struggling with completion of Algebra 2 credits, could we offer another option? Still requiring those 4 years of mathematics and increasing that rigor, but with something like a work keys assessment, pulling those components out and creation of a course that aligns to those specific rigorous academic standards that they're assessing through work keys. Would that make sense for that particular population of students as in their path, where they're still maintaining a rigorous mathematics program, but just with a different outcome? Because maybe they don't need Algebra 2 skills, as we're hearing from workforce, that they don't need the Algebra 2 skills to come and work in an advanced manufacturing shop, etc. Some may. So maybe there's a Cte pathway that requires a higher level mathematics, like an engineering pathway. So being able to diversify those options, I think, down the road is a direction that I would like to see it go. But for right now, this is the last Core 40 option, is with technical honors. So I wanted to talk for a moment about establishing high expectations for all, which I know a piece that they pointed out as well. And I wanted to hit on the changes with the standards in ELA and mathematics, which actually occurred in April of 2014. And this was the State Board of Education approving this adoption of these new standards for ELA and math. And they were a result of identifying, evaluating, and synthesizing the high-quality, rigorous Indiana standards for Indiana students. So it was not just taking the CCR standards, but it was Indianizing them, is what I'm hearing the term. But it was through a process with the Indiana Roundtable, the Commission for Higher Ed, Department of Ed, State Board of Education, the Center for Education and Career Innovation. So many players were at the table, making sure that they had vetted those standards and making sure that they were what they felt were valuable for both post-secondary attainment as well as career readiness. So what that was meant to do was to show that if a student were to complete the requirements, the graduation requirements in ELA and mathematics in the state of Indiana, that student had successfully mastered the objectives and would be able to do the math and ELA disciplines moving on into whatever field they chose post-graduation, either workforce or post-secondary, without the need of remediation. So that was the goal in 2014 when those standards were established. So I want to talk also about transition to post-secondary goals. There are a variety of things I've already mentioned here, but I wanted to give you a little bit of data. I'm not going to go really heavy on the data side, but I wanted to talk about, and I know this was mentioned earlier too, about supporting the frictionless transitions for students into post-secondary and some of the things that we're doing and some of the outcomes that we've seen in terms of AP, dual credit, IB, and CTE. And CTE, there's so much data that we could pull for that I'm not going to go heavy into it, because once I go, I have to really go. And so you're only going to get a little snippet. We can go a little bit deeper if you'd like to in a future session. So as it relates to providing all options for all students and around the knowledge base and around transitions to post-secondary, we're working to expose them to those rigorous academic standards through our specific course sequencing and aligning that to their goals for post-secondary attainment, whether it's at higher institution or for going into the workforce. So some of that is AP, some of that's dual credit translating over into post-secondary, and for some of that's an industry certification or industry credential. Additionally, some of that's just attending that IB school and then completing those assessments with IB. Another thing that I thought was important to note here with this data is some of the collaboration that we've done at the department, at least in the last several months that I've been there, the last several short months of 6 that I've been there. But collaboration with the Commission for Higher Ed, talking about some of those issues that we see as it relates to this dual credit cliff that I mentioned earlier, and how we provide solutions for our teachers to become properly credentialed for the HLC, articulation of those industry certifications so that number even continues to grow, but making sure that they're relevant as it relates to the workforce needs here in Indiana, and then also other conversations around the credentialing engine piece that CHE is working on. With the College Board, we've had a lot of conversation about providing AP mentoring programs for our AP teachers to be able to up that rigor within those AP courses and also attain additional outcomes. And then preparation programs for not only PSAT and SAT, but also ACT and what that might look like. So trying to allow students to elect to take college credits earlier in high school has been our focus, preparing them for that post-secondary institution after graduation. And the data really tells us that those students that are earning that industry credential through those CT enrollments that are just under 100,000, they are filling a need for Indiana. Even though they may not be going on to post-secondary education immediately, they may later, but they are fulfilling a need in terms of filling the workforce skills gap that our employers need.
How many more do you have of the 30? We'd like to have time for a couple questions, and we're already over our time. So. Okay,
I'm going to speed through just a few more, so I'll skip through some that are not quite as relevant. We can always go back if you'd like to.
Great.
So this is just an outline of showing how CT relates to graduation rates. I'm not going to touch on this except to say that CT is working and is allowing students to graduate at a higher rate. This, although the tags are a little bit small, this graphic shows a 10-year projection for Indiana occupations, but for all occupations. And overall, it's 1 million occupations that will be available over the next 10 years. And this is the breakdown and looking at all of them. And this is a comparison, and I can provide these to you as well, so you can dive a little bit deeper into this. But this is a comparison really with the next slide, which is same data, but it's specific to only the what we call 3 flames or more in terms of Department of Workforce Development and workforce data, and it's those moderate to high wage and then high demand occupations within Indiana over the next 10 years. So as we look at that, just with this 3 flame model, you can see that the industry certification and some college credits, which is what we're providing students at secondary level, is 28.72% of the jobs over the next 10 years are going to need that credential. Whereas high school diploma or its equivalency will be 37.6%. Below that is a very small percentage, 0.13. And above the industry certification and college credit that you can obtain in secondary or in PK-12, there's an associate's percentage of 9.31 or 72,000 jobs, and a bachelor's level of 19.3 or just under 150,000 jobs. So I think that's really important data to look at as we consider what are we doing currently in the PK-12 landscape.
Data?
It sure is.
Okay.
Yep.
Could I just ask a quick question, and that is, this slide seems to fly directly in opposition to a slide that you showed that showed that like 1% of jobs have been created since like 2010 have been at the high school diploma or equivalent level. Almost 99% of the jobs required some kind of post-secondary institution credentials. Did I misread your slide?
That's correct. In the recovery, since the recovery of like 2010, 2011 time, new jobs created from 2010 through 2015, 99% required some post-secondary.
Yeah, so that I guess I'm questioning where we're getting our data. It could be that Indiana's economy is much less sophisticated than other state economies where the rest of this data is. I don't know, but something doesn't seem right there. When I think about even just my own anecdotal knowledge of Indiana business, I think it's getting harder and harder to find jobs that just a high school diploma or the equivalent is adequate for them to get jobs. So I worry about us making significant decisions, because that would be a key piece of information that would drive how we look at, or how you look at redoing this whole thing to take us to the next level in Indiana.
Yes, and this data comes directly from the Department of Workforce Development.
Okay.
So this is their data that this came from, and it's their 10-year projection for the 1 million jobs that they talk about all the time.
And we have had some discussions about whether there was an undervaluing of levels of education. So we may take this particular chart with a grain of salt a little bit and know that we're still talking about these, and some of it is whether this has embedded certificates when they say high school or less. If it's got a certificate in there, that's one thing. If it doesn't have a certificate, it's another. We could definitely go, we probably shouldn't do too much on this chart today because it's so it's so important that for us to just, you know, not give it the time that it's due is not writing it. We don't really have the time, but I think it really does speak to this building this economy based on what the workforce needs are, and there are some disparate points of view out there that we've got to try to grapple with. So with that, maybe you could just keep going on and we'll talk about that chart.
No problem. So some opportunities have been outlined within the work that we're currently doing, and then also as some of the work progresses with ESSA, is looking at that college readiness percentage, that 25%. We don't disagree that we shouldn't raise that, but there's a possible future opportunity to do that, but that dual credit cliff that I mentioned before is outlined here. So what we're calling this dual credit cliff is obviously with the change in the Higher Learning Commission and being in compliance by 2022, we have a concern about what that's going to look like at the local level, and we've had a lot of conversation, a great conversation with CHE in trying to work together and put together some plans that can help to offset this. But the current concern would be, based off of the 2015 statewide data that you can see there for those 4-year cohort graduates, if the way that the CCR calculation is made currently, with dual credit we're at 66.68, but if you remove that because those teachers are no longer credentialed, hypothetically, that would drop to 23.31, which is already under the established low, 25%.
Well, could I just say this without going way out on the ledge? We're not going to let that happen. We're going to, you know, we are doing everything we can to make sure that we have dual credit teachers are going to be prepared. So I understand we have to play out the worst case scenario, but that is not going to be the scenario in Indiana. It can't be. We have a statute that requires dual credit to be provided with AP. You know, whatever we have to do, this is an area in which we can certainly partner with you to make sure that that scenario is not Indiana's story.
Right, and I would completely agree with you, and I think those conversations are going on. I just want to make sure that you have an understanding of why did the board not up that rigor? Why did they not move up that CCR percentage when we just submitted or
prepared? It might help us if they did, though. It might help us if they did, because then we can make the case for what we have to get there. That's another discussion.
Yes, it is. So going on to a couple other opportunities, I mentioned the Graduation Pathways panel before and the work that they're doing. If you've been able to attend, it's fascinating to have that conversation kind of occurring. There's a lot of good conversation happening, but really development of pathway graduations and beyond for all. I know a lot of conversation that has occurred about potentially creating one Indiana diploma with a variety of pathways to get to that through a point system, etc. And that would look very different for a student that was going college bound versus not going college bound. So those are some of the conversations that are being held, and it's been extremely interesting. I would encourage you to attend those if you can. But I wanted to mention quickly as well about the graduation option that we talked about earlier that's currently in place with the general diploma, and then under ESSA that cannot be counted for federal accountability. So we have schools now that are scrambling until this graduation pathway panel work is complete to find out what it is that they would do with those students. So if they currently are under a waiver, that's about 6,000 students right now, then under federal regulation as a graduate. So trying to figure out what that's going to look like for those students through this pathway panel work, and still upping the rigor and making sure that they're prepared for that next step regardless. So that's really what the focus of that work is. The other piece of work that I wanted to hit on was the Cte Pathways project, because it's so relevant as it relates to all of these pieces. Graduation pathways, as well as college and career readiness indicators, and whether or not that's 25% is up to, or whether or not those 4 pieces of IB, AP, dual credit, etc., maybe they're expanded to look at other pieces. And I think those are conversations that we need to have, and be bringing in some of the accountability individuals within that division of the department as well to have those conversations about what else could you add into that CCR calculation to make it more up to par with what would really be an indication of college and career readiness. So there's a lot of work going on with that, with partnership through UIndy with the Pathways Project, and then also alignment with those high-wage, high-demand jobs and the work that GWD is doing. And we also have a kickoff actually today with our STEM framework development and our council trying to provide high quality access for all with STEM education. As we know, that research shows that that's going to up the outcomes for students in both ELA and mathematics if they have a STEM integrated model within their schools, and utilizing of that evidence-based practices within that.
Is there one more chart that you just have to show, because we probably only
have time at the end actually, so.
Okay. I know. We maybe should have allowed more time or divided these up between 2, because we really had to rush both of the presentations, and I apologize for that, and really didn't have a chance to really ask about some really important questions. I would like to put on the table 2 for us to think about going forward, and then we still have to approve. We have to do several other things at the commission meeting today, and we so we're going to have to move on. But they would be one, how can we align Indiana's ESSA proposal with what the career college readiness? And so I know that the proposal has already been put in, but is there something that we can do to ensure that we have aligned what K-12 is doing in their ESSA application with what college and career readiness might be seen from higher ed in a way that we can do that? So that would be one of my discussions. And then the other, based on the presentation from Matt and Ryan and your comments as well, would be, how can we move forward this discussion about making sure that once we identify students who are not college ready, which we have to do by state statute, what are we doing with them? Because right now there is no what happens after that, except if it happens at particular schools. So the ESSA alignment with career college readiness and the transitional course would be two things that Amanda would be, I think, two ways in which we can really work together with you guys to try to figure out. And then I think the other issue, which we didn't have time, is really the teacher prep issue is another issue, whether it's the dual credit or a broader discussion.
Could I just make one add to that? And that would be that whatever we do, I think it makes sense for us to understand what is going on in other states, so that we're not doing it in our own fishbowl. But we've got, if we're not going to be at the very top, highly competitive with other states, we're going to end up setting a series of goals that would be less than what Indiana should start.
And I think the last point that we need to say is we need to get on the same page with our data. So we know that we're actually all operating from, at least, there may be some caveats that we need to make under that about differences that we have, but expectations for educational and training needs, we need to at least understand that and have the same lexicon that we're using. And I think we still a little bit removed. Is there anything any of the three of you would like to say just in closing? And I apologize that we have to cut you off so quickly. Any response to each other? No.
No response. I just want to say that this is not unique. There are a lot of getting the two systems to work hand in glove is hard, but I think if the leadership is committed, there are a lot of examples, to your point, of states that have done it in various ways. And we'd certainly be happy to share those examples with you. And even with the ESSA strategy, states are submitting their plans now, but then they have to actually go and implement. And during implementation, we fully expect states to start evolving the strategies and get more, as they get more concrete and tangible. I would say, an opportunity to get the plan where you want it, but even a better opportunity to work together and shape the work after the plan is submitted. All the plan submission is a submission to the feds. And they approve it, or they ask for some changes, and then you ultimately have to go and implement. So there's a lot of opportunity in implementation, I think, to forge these alliances that you were describing. So
more to come, lots of conversations, and thanks to all three of you.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Matt, Ryan, and Amanda. That was stimulating and critical area of work, so thank you for coming in and letting us know what's going on and the work ahead. They clearly articulated the importance of strengthening student preparation of mathematics in Indiana. And we as a commission have an opportunity to adopt a resolution to strengthen math preparation in Indiana. The proposed resolution is on page 15 in your books. Wanted to ask if there's any discussion on the proposed resolution.
I think the whereases are pretty clear as background. What we really need to look at is what we've resolved, and it's pretty open. I mean, basically, we're saying that the Indiana Commission for Higher Education commits to work jointly with the Indiana Department of Education and other stakeholders to design and implement a new transition math course for students in 12th grade who are not yet ready for college level coursework and to scale these opportunities statewide. This is what we are saying. We're committed to working to do. Obviously, there's lots to do and what that means, but it gives us a way to move forward if that is the will of the commission.
Hey, I have a Chris.
Yes.
This is John Pop. I'm sorry, I got tied up and didn't get it at the beginning of the meeting, but I noticed the resolution talks about leave high school ready to engage in college level work. Aren't we also concerned that they're able to go to a technical school? Are we saying college level would include community college, or should should it say post-secondary programs of study?
When we say college, we certainly mean the community college as well. So, but if you feel more comfortable with for post-secondary course education, or we can make that adjustment.
I know it's whatever you think. I just wondered if it's a little broader.
Jason, do you want me to explain that?
No, I feel comfortable with the language that the commission would like, but either the phrases are synonymous in my mind. Post-secondary and college level.
I would leave it as college because I think it's a little bit more defined. The problem with post-secondary is that could be anything after high school.
I mean, the real point that we're trying to
go for a higher quality, which includes junior college.
Yeah, and the point of this is really that they would be able to enter college not needing remediation. And so I think it's in that way, what you're saying is correct, John, that we've been talking about all kinds of training beyond high school, but for the purposes of this transition math course, it's to show that they don't need remediation when they enter into the most part into the community college.
Kind of broad term anyway.
Okay.
I was just, since we're dealing with the math, I think we really want to be as defined as we can be and requiring high quality.
I was just curious, how does this, why are we doing this? I mean, we obviously are in favor. I mean, what's this resolution?
Basically, so that we can.
We all believe, we want all these kids that are going to college.
Well, I think it helps the staff to be able to say that the commission actually would like us to be working in this regard with our K-12 colleagues to get this done. So it's just another lever, as we've actually done with a lot of our other resolutions, where we go on record with a sort of a direction for action.
So this is directing our staff to work with.
Yes.
I see.
Yes.
And then we'll give them more leverage.
Sometimes we should have this kind of cover to get credibility when the staff is working with other divisions of government.
And beyond FMA, that we're pursuing foundational funding to support the work that was discussed today too, so that's an additional sign of state commitment to this work.
I move.
Move. Got a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Passes. At our last commission meeting, if you remember, we had a public square discussion on transcripts to better demonstrate a student's ability. Based on our discussion, there is a transcript resolution on page 19 of this book that talks to the discussion that we had last month. Are there any comments or questions on that resolution?
Move it.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Passes. Thank you. We're going to now move on to academic degree programs for expedited action. So these are programs that have gone through committee and staff with a recommendation to pass. What I would like to do, and I want to make sure I'm clear about this, is that there's 6 programs there, and what I'd like to, and to begin on page 21, what I'd like to do would be to remove one of them from the motion for expedited action. The one that I'm removing is the Master of Environmental Sustainability offered by Indiana University in Bloomington. I'd like to just remove that for its own vote following this one on expedited action. So what I would like to request would be a motion on these expedited programs offered to us by our committee and staff work, with the exception of number 3.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Passes. And then what I'd like to do then is take a separate vote on the Master of Environmental Sustainability to be offered by Indiana University Bloomington. Is there a motion? Motion? Second?
I'm just curious, why are we voting on second?
Let me open up to discussion.
Now, it's because I'm going to vote yes because I don't feel that disability courses are really science courses. They're more political courses, and I try with that group of scientists climate change is affected man to the extent that it is. So I'm going to vote against it.
Any further discussion? Motion? Has been moved and seconded. Okay, all in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, so I want to make sure that we caught that. Good. Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate that. We're now going to move quickly to capital projects for full discussion. We've got 3 on the agenda. Our first project is the Bioscience Innovation Building at Purdue University Northwest. I'd like to invite Tony Hahn, who's the Director of State Relations and Policy Analysis, to present this project. Tony?
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, I'm Tony Hahn with Purdue. I have 2 projects for your consideration today. First, as referenced, is the Bioscience Innovation Building. If this looks familiar, it's because it was our number 3 request in this legislative session's capital proposal. It also has been on the request list for nearly a decade. This will create a new 68,000 square foot facility to contain our teaching and research labs for the College of Nursing and Department of Biological Sciences at our Northwest campus. The building it's currently housed in will be demolished as part of it, and by demolishing that building alone, it will save 14% of the deferred R&R on that entire campus, because it is a much outdated building that was given to us in 1953 when the Northwest campus was created. This is a $40.5 million project, with $35.1 coming from this year's legislative session in the form of fee-replace bonds. $2.4 million came from the previous legislative session in 2015 in the form of cash for architectural and engineering planning. We anticipate $2 million worth of gift funds to be raised by the Northwest campus, and we are contributing $1 million in university funds from our central reserves. This will be a very impactful building for the Northwest campus that has now completed its consolidation between the Calumet and the Westville Northwest campus. Our College of Nursing is one of our strongest programs there and in very high demand in the Northwest part of the state. Any questions?
Where will this building be?
It will be on the Hammond campus of the Purdue Northwest system.
Tony, I apologize for not having asked this question in the committee meeting. Can you tell me, for both this and the next project, why there is such a difference between the gross square feet and the available square feet?
Oh, the yield between...
space?
Oh,
space?
Yeah, the assignable square feet versus the gross square feet. This one, the yield, it comes to about... This one comes to about 60%. And that would be pretty standard for a building that would have lab space, hallways, it would have some administrative facilities, it would have you would call an atrium, a mezzanine, gathering places for the students. The other building is a veterinary teaching hospital, and that has very different space utilization. And so what you'll find on that building, you've got a yield of assignable versus gross at about 50%, and so there's much more space that is unassignable in the hospital because of how the labs are configured, how an ICU has hallways, how the animals and the livestock are led in through the building. So you utilize the space much differently, and it's not considered assignable in the hospital. So
what are you defining as assignable? I should ask that question, in particular with regard to lab space.
Well, there's a code. There's a coding system that you look at the schematics and the prints, and you can assign it as classroom, as lab, as academic, as storage. And so as we work through the design process, those are determined as you would almost name the spaces and their utilization. And so as you look at some HVAC, or if you have chases that run through the middle of buildings or stairwells, those are not assignable. Any common space or other wall thickness of walls, things that cannot be, I don't want to use the word inhabited, but really assigned a particular use. And so different design specifications yield different assignable versus gross depending on the design of two-story mezzanines have less assignable space on that second floor than staircases, elevator shafts.
I guess my concern is that we had addressed this a number of years ago when we were going through a little bit of a financial crisis in the city and looking at capital expenditures. And the concern that we were building a lot more ceremonial space, as it were, that we really needed. I want to make sure that what we're doing here or in these buildings is functional space in some way, as opposed to necessarily ceremonial space or what we space that's not normally used. And I guess we want to make sure that we're not building mausoleums as opposed to facilities that are properly used and efficiently used and effectively used. And that there seems to be a movement back towards wider spreads between gross and assignables than we saw a few years ago.
And I think
that's what we saw 15 years ago.
And that's a very astute observation as you look at the square footage. If you look at the Bioscience building up at the Northwest campus, that yield of about 60% would be pretty normal for a space that would have a mix of academic, a mix of administrative, and other functions. Again, the hospital that we'll talk about next is such a unique building, and we are cramming as much as we can into that, but the space is set up so much differently. If you think about how a hospital is, even a human hospital, is different than perhaps an office building. So you do end up with a smaller yield, but you need the space to move the large animals around, so you have wider hallways, you have bigger rooms because you have literally bigger patients than you would in a human hospital.
Okay, I think what I understand, Mr. Chairman, is in the future we can have a staff sort of look at this issue separately and try to have a better understanding of the assignment versus non-assignment and how the assignments go in some of the facilities we're looking at.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very good point, Chris, and we'll have staff.
I think Dom's paying attention.
We'll have staff take a look at that. I mean, there's no question when you start looking at $1,000 assignable square foot, that's getting into something that needs justification.
Understand? Yeah, we'd be happy to discuss the design that we consider and how we assign this.
Anything else? If we're sitting here approving this, we're supposed to be approving that the dollars are being used effectively and efficiently for the taxpayers. So
right.
I think we need to be a little bit better educated and knowledgeable as we look at these kinds of expenditures.
Excellent point. Good point and noted.
Any specific questions about the Bioscience facility?
I'm approving things that I'm really not sure are in our best interest, but looking into these things a little deeper, I think would be clear.
Okay. Okay, any further questions for Tony?
I'm just curious that this one was a priority 3. Is that a typo or was it a priority?
It was our third priority in our enumerated list that we submit during the legislative process.
And did we approve it?
You did. This body did not recommend our third priority, which is why I bring this to you today.
I see, because I didn't think we did.
That's right. You had recommended our number 1 priority, which is in the Expedited list.
That's right.
The legislature chose to fund 2 projects for our system.
1 and 3?
That's right. Correct.
And this was approved this was done by the legislature.
Well, in the political world,
I see. Well, the legislature trumps, I think.
Tom, do you have a recommendation?
This was reviewed on August 31st, and just a reminder, it was a priority 3 project, and the priority 2 project was a different campus. So staff does recommend your approval of this project. I'll have you answer the question.
Motion?
Motion. Second.
And a second. Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
I think we have some work to do going forward about how we handle issues like this, though.
Yeah, I would agree.
Okay, our next project is the Veterinary Medicine Teaching Hospital Phase 1 at Purdue University, West Lafayette. And Tony, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a very special project for our West Lafayette campus. This will be the first phase of replacing our veterinary medicine teaching hospital, which our current hospital was built in 1959. As you may or may not know, we are the only college of veterinary medicine in the state and one of 28 in the country. We're also one of only 4 in the country that trains every aspect of the veterinarian office, from the vet tech to the doctor of veterinary medicine. Phase 1 would construct a approximately 76,000 square foot large animal and equine hospital, which will have a separate entrance off of campus for biosecurity reasons, different paddocks that will be able to hold the large animals. Within a large animal and equine hospital, it is not only a hospital, it's also a clinical teaching hospital for our Doctor of Veterinary Medicine students. This will contain surgery rooms, radiology, a receiving area, and a paddock. We have diagnostic equipment, intensive care unit, pre-surgery, post-surgery, recovery ward. And this will be the first of 3 different facilities that would address our aging teaching hospital needs. Part of the American Veterinary Medical Association accreditation is the teaching facilities that are on each campus of the 28 vet schools. And it has been noted that our facilities are aging and don't meet current biosecurity standards. So this will start to address some of the accreditation concerns as the accreditors do come back in 2018. For those of you who don't know, the veterinary hospital contains really 3 distinct animals: a large animal, equine, small animal, and food animal. We operate the only full-service veterinary teaching hospital in the state. We admitted 20,000 some patients in the hospital last year. We maintain 4 ambulances that saw 60,000 plus patients either in a herd or a farm. And it is run very much like a 24-hour emergency hospital with red signs at the entrance that you can bring an animal in at any time. This project is estimated to cost $35 million and will be paid for by central university funds that have been centrally reserved especially for this project of $30 million and gift funds of $5 million, which will be raised by the College of Veterinary Medicine.
Any questions for Tony on this one?
Since this is a hospital, will it have to pay for itself?
That's an excellent question, Mr. Pop. It does have a revenue stream that supports the operation of the hospital. The patients, be it 4-legged, winged, or otherwise, they do incur a charge and a fee, and the hospital is essentially self-supporting, although it does fall under the College of Veterinary Medicine, which, as you can imagine, has a completely different cost structure than many of our other colleges.
Oh, but the hospital, I didn't know there was some colleagues interrupted, but you say the hospital will pretty much pay for itself, but the teaching is separate and the first that's by the university.
The hospital, while it does have teaching and academic component, the hospital does have a revenue stream from its patients and historically has paid for itself. It the operation of the hospital and the care of the animals.
Okay, Dominic?
Staff recommendation is for approval, but I'm happy to take any questions at all.
Yeah, I just have, it's just curious, the $30 million that comes from the university fund, that's just reserved.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's reserves that we have put back out of the year-end balances that we've moved to the capital fund, especially for this project.
Right.
Where did the money come from originally?
It would be, Mr. Pop, that would be perhaps a balance at the end of a fiscal year, and those funds could come in from interest income, other income. I've had this discussion with the budget committee about how we tag public dollars versus non-public dollars because they have different investment policies, and so we're able to put into reserve non-public dollars at the end of the fiscal year.
So moved.
Motion?
Second.
Second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none? Passes. Okay. Thank you. The third project is Indiana State University Holman Center renovation. I'd like to invite Senior Vice President of Finance Administration and University Treasurer to present this project. Diane.
Thank you, Chairman Love. Built in 1973 as a multi-purpose facility, Holman Center serves as a venue for student convocations, commencement, speaker series, performing arts, athletic events, and a variety of community activities. Academic programs that utilize the facility include athletic training, sports management, and communications to our student-led ESPN3 network. All of these programs, academic programs, provide experiential learning opportunities for our students and help them achieve career-ready outcomes. In 2015, the Indiana General Assembly appropriated $37.5 million in fee-replaced funding for the renovation of this facility. This amount was to be matched by the City of Terre Haute, Vigo County, and the Vigo County Convention and Visitors Bureau for the expansion of the facility to include a conference center. After 2 years of working with our local partners, we have been unable to secure a firm financial commitment for the project, for the entire project. Like many units of local government at this time, there are fiscal constraints within our community that have evolved for both city and county governments that make their financial participation difficult at this juncture. Because of this, and recognizing the need to preserve the facility, the Indiana State University Board of Trustees has determined it best to move forward with requesting release of the $37.5 million earmarked for the renovation of the existing facility at this time, while maintaining the option at a future point that if there could be a phase 2 of the project that would include the construction of a conference facility once our local partners would have funds in hand. In order to address the infrastructure needs of the facility in terms of mechanical systems, electrical systems, exterior envelope, and safety, a total project cost of $50 million is anticipated. The total project would be funded with the issuance of the $37.5 million of fee-replaced debt as appropriated by the Indiana General Assembly, gifts received, capital reserves, and non-fee replaced borrowing. President Bradley is with me today, and we would be pleased to answer any questions you may have about this project. Thank you.
Questions from the Commission?
So fees will pay the full service of the bond, the $37 million bond.
Well, the $37.5 million, the debt service was essentially appropriated by the 2015 Indiana General Assembly. The university will issue the debt, and we pledge student fees, and then the state of Indiana reimburses us and replaces those fees that we have pledged. It's a term that the state uses, but really what they're doing, what that means is that they've appropriated dollars for that portion of the debt service.
Right.
Without getting into all the complexities of this, I will tell you that we have met with Diane and Greg and talked to legislative leaders as well. This is different than what the original proposal was. We're convinced, based on the conversations, that there is a support in the General Assembly to move forward in this direction, obviously. We wanted to make sure that a presentation was made because it is different from what you originally had voted on. But it's one that we have clearly tried to do our due diligence with them and determine what's happening. There's been quite a bit of coverage about this issue in the Terre Haute paper. We knew that some of you might have been aware of that, but I think that Dom can attest to this too, that we come to today with, assurance that we've really done our due diligence with them to make sure that this is a proposal that should go forward today.
Tracy, just a question. Do we have or is there any condition preceding or required here in terms of the legislation that was passed when the budget was approved? I mean, were there conditions in, or was it?
I'm going to defer to Diane. Did you hear the question? Were there any conditions in the passage?
The budget bill references authorization for a project up to $75 million, of which only $37.5 million would be funded by the state. So there was no, there was no requirement, if you will, that there be a state, a one-to-one match, but that to have a $75 million project, the state was only putting in half of that amount. But there was no contingency, if you will, that they had to happen at the same time.
I guess I just want to make sure that there are no legal impediments for us to approve this relative to the prior approval by the legislature.
I do not believe there are.
And we have discussed this with budget agency staff and fiscal analysts both on the House and the Senate side, and they're aware of the wording in the budget bill and what we're requesting, and have expressed no issues of concern about that.
Any other questions?
I kind of missed the answer to the fee replacement. Did I hear that the legislature pays the interest? Is that, do I understand that?
The state of Indiana reimburses institutions for that portion of the debt service of which they have appropriated funding.
John, fee replacement is just a term referred to there. And historically, that's why we've had this sort of guideline of 10% of our funding going to support that sort of the interest on debt, so that we're not continuing to allocate more and more money to funding debt and less to funding programs and teaching.
I see. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just reiterate the Commissioner's comments on the review process, and after staff review in committee, we do recommend approval.
Could you speak up, please?
Sorry. Yeah, after staff review and the committee review, we do recommend approval of the project. And to your earlier question, Chris, we did look at the statute and the budget bill, and there is nothing hindering the approval of this project.
Okay, thank you.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded. Thank you. Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. I note the presence of President Bradley. Thank you for coming and sharing afternoon with us.
Thank you for approving.
During the afternoon with us,
Okay, we next up is capital projects for expedited action. We have 8 capital projects on the agenda. They're listed in your agenda book beginning on page 51. Dom, do you have a? Okay. All right.
So
Thank you, Chris. I'm getting punchy here. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Terrific. Passes. There are information items in the book. Academic degree programs awaiting action. Academic degree programs taken by staff, pages 55 and 57. Media coverage, etc. Is there any old business?
The only other thing that I would say is, we used to have these meetings from 1 to 4. We tried very hard to cut back on the time, and today was an example of the fact that this is sometimes too heavy a lift in a period of time, and so we need to account for this in our planning going forward. And just so you know, we may not always be able to get you out of here at that time. We may need to either start at 12:30 for that meeting, or may have to go till 3:30 or sometimes, because there were some really important questions and issues and concerns raised, and I'm not sure we gave them all their due today. So just know that we might have to make some adjustments in the future of the time.
I agree. Some of them be tough stuff.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
I would just say, since we've been talking about the Alaska Native Science and Engineering Program is something to look at, because it's about almost 2 decades old, and it's done incredible things in Alaska. They moved their students that were 3% of graduates from Alaskan school systems were going into the science and/or engineering industries in Alaska before they started the program, and now it's something like 50%.
Oh, wow.
It's incredible, but they've added layers and elements over the years. So now they're down at the elementary level and going up into the following students all the way to when they actually get a job and help assist. Yeah, it's really cool.
Any other comments? The next commission meeting is on October 12th, and it's in John Pop's neighborhood of Fort Wayne. We are adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.